This video is taken from my course on how to create a hybrid casual mobile game. More info in the description. Welcome back, guys. In this lesson, we are going to integrate an inventory display script that will manage all of our UI crop containers and display the associate one. Okay, so let's jump right into it. Inside of the inventory folder, so it's in scripts, inventory, right here, we are going to create a new C# script. Let's call it inventory display. Okay, perfect. So let's attach this script to our inventory manager. All right, cool. You could actually create a new game object, and it's a choice that you can make. And by the way, I think that we forgot to specify these in the last lesson. So let's actually select our UI crop container, open it in prefab mode, and let's pass in our image and text. Perfect. Now we will be able to call the configure method and update display method without having errors. Null reference exception. You'll have so much null reference exception errors in your game dev journey. You'll see. But that's okay. The important part is fixing them. Okay? Cool. So I guess we can open our inventory display script now. Perfect. And let's start implementing it. So the first thing we will need, let's create a header for that. Elements, okay. We will actually need our UI crop container prefab because this script will instantiate them as needed. Okay, so let's add it, private UI crop container prefab. Maybe let's call it UI crop container prefab. Yep, that's better. And we will also need to know where we want to instantiate them. So we basically need to specify the inventory display game object because this is the container, okay? Let's actually rename it inventory display container. Yeah, something like that. Cool. So let's now grab our prefab. So let's select this one, select it. Cool. Now we can see where it is. Drag it in and drop it inside of the reference right here, inside of the field. Cool, this is a good thing. So now let's add a reference to the parent. So serialize field, private, transform. Let's call it crop containers parent. Perfect, let's go back to Unity and also specify it. So let's grab it, drop it here. Cool, we now have our parent and the prefab that we want to instantiate. Awesome. So right now, I'm going to delete all of the UI crop containers that we've got because we need to test that. So let's open the script and start implementing. So the first thing we want to do is create a method to configure the inventory display. So let's call it configure. How can we configure our display? We first need the inventory because it has all of the data that we need, the amount of crops, the crop type, and so on. So to configure, I'm actually add an argument of type inventory. Okay, so this means that we need to call that method from somewhere else because if you think a little bit, we can't configure the display without configuring the inventory. So basically what I'm thinking now is that we will call that method from the inventory manager because this is where we load the inventory. So just after loading the inventory, we might have something like that, like inventory display dot configure and pass in our inventory. I definitely think that's the best way of doing it. So yeah, you can actually also create an action like we've done previously. So you can create an action that takes an inventory as an argument. And whenever you load your inventory, trigger that action, send the inventory in the air, and whoever wants to use it will use it. That's a way of doing, but because both of these scripts are tightly linked, okay, tightly coupled, they are attached to the same game object, it's going to be easier to simply cache it and use it. So let's add a require component attributes of type, so type of inventory display, like so. Perfect. Let's now add a reference to it. So inventory display, let's call it inventory display. Okay, so let's say inventory display equals get component of type inventory display. Cool. We could actually create a method for that. I think it would be cleaner. So private void, let's call it configure inventory display, like so. Grab these two lines, pop them here, and call that method. Awesome. We can actually remove the space between these two ones. Remove this line, and we are good to go. So this is the first step. Now that we call the inventory display.configure method, let's actually test it. So let's in here call the inventory dot. Oh, we've removed the debug. Did we remove the debug line? Debug. Oh, it's private. So let's make it public, just to check if we receive the inventory or not. So inventory.debug inventory. Perfect. Let's now go back to Unity. And I guess we should have some crops. Let's have a look at the save file. We should have 16 corn and 18 tomatoes. And that's exactly it. Perfect. So now we are sure that we are grabbing our inventory from here. Cool. So now that this is working, we can remove this line, okay? And the first thing we will need is the inventory items list, okay? So the inventory has that list. It's here, but it's private. So let's make a method to return that. So public, it should return a list, or maybe just an array, actually. An array will do. So an array of inventory item. Let's call it get inventory items. Okay, so this should return the items. But we have an error because we are returning an array of inventory items, but this is a list of inventory items. There is a quick workaround. You can actually use the extension method to array, like so. And Unity will convert that list into an array so that you can use it. Okay, that's perfect. All right, so let's create that array. So inventory items equals inventory.get inventory items. Perfect. So now we have a reference to that. And we can now actually loop through them. So for each item, okay, like so. For each item, we want to instantiate a UI crop container prefab, okay, under that parent. Then configure it with the amount of that specific crop that we've got, along with the crop icon. So we don't have a crop icon for now, but we'll get into that, okay? For now, let's just configure the crop container amount. So we can write UI crop container, let's call it crop container instance maybe, equals instantiate to create one. So we are going to create a prefab and drop it under the crop container's parent. Perfect. So now we have a reference to that crop container. Then we want to call the crop container instance dot update display. So later on, we are going to call the configure method, but we don't have a reference to the icon that we need to set for now. We just know how many crops we've got from that specific type. So let's just use this method and then we can add icons later on. So let's update the display with the items index I.amount. Perfect. And that should be it actually. So let's give it a try. Let's go back to Unity. Let's hit play. Oh, exit the play mode first. Hit play. And this is working pretty well. So we've got 16 corn and 18 corn. No, that's actually tomatoes, but we haven't changed the icons. Come on, I just told you that. But yeah, the amount is working pretty well. So let's try and sow, but it's not gonna work. Come on, because we are not updating them. Okay, just to test things out again. I haven't been sewing for a long time because I was using the automatic methods right here. Yeah, feels good. Okay, so it's not changing. But if I quit and come back, it's actually going to display 25. Okay, perfect. So 25 corn and 18 tomatoes. Cool. So in the next lesson, we are actually going to learn how we can also implement icons. That will be, yeah, that's actually better than seeing the corn icon every time for every crop. So yeah, see you in the next lesson.